Now, look, when those goods come back into the United States, let's say, okay, they've come in to the US, but they haven't been tax stamped. So if the pack of cigarettes is $10, but $8.50 is the cost of taxes, you have to pay those taxes. Now, if you don't pay those taxes, that product is an illegal product, okay? And when it's illegal, it's not a gray market product, it's a black market product. So gray markets are products that there's nothing illegal about them. Now, the reason why I say quasi-legal is you may have broken your distribution agreement. You may have cheated on your commercial contract with the brand manager or the brand firm, okay? But you haven't broken the laws of the nation. The moment that you're breaking the laws of the nation, that's when it becomes a black market good, okay? So technically, when you're breaking the national laws, it's a black market good. Otherwise, it tends to be a gray market product, okay? So look, a pack of cigarettes, it's intended to go down to Venezuela. It gets on a boat, comes back into the United States. If they take and they stamp them and pay their taxes before selling them to the public, it's all well and good. It's just a gray market good. Now, if you were the importer from Venezuela, okay, you had a contract with PMI Philip Morris, okay, you had a contract to sell those in Venezuela. And if you're diverting those goods back into the United States, you're kind of breaking your commercial agreement. You were set up to be an importer into Venezuela, and now what are you doing? You're technically importing product into the United States. So at that point, you're breaking the commercial agreement. And that's why I say gray market is quasi-legal, okay? It may be what you did breaks your commercial agreement. It's against the letter of the law. Okay, so other things that we see gray markets in, telephone equipment, a lot of times when the new Apple iPhones come out or something like this, a product that's intended for developed markets where the prices are high winds up in some of the developing marketplaces where the prices might be low or they just haven't decided to start marketing those goods or services yet. Things like perfume, this is a regularly gray marketed good. Okay, and what happens very often with something like perfumes is, let's suppose that I have a importer, and the importer is in a small country like, let's just say Greece. Okay, now if I'm the importer of Chanel perfume in Greece, okay, I'm supposed to import the product into Greece and sell it in Greece and develop the market in Greece. Okay, now what happens? A firm like, let's say Walmart, a big retailer in the United States, calls you up and they say, hey, you know what? I know that you're the importer of Chanel perfume over there into Greece. And I know that you buy this stuff, let's just say for $150 a bottle. You sell it to the retailer for $300 a bottle, and they sell it to the consumer for $600 a bottle. Now, you bought it for $150, you'd like to sell it for $300, but what I will do is I will buy 5,000 bottles from you, and I'll give you $20 more than you paid for it, and I'll come pick it up from you. So instead of selling for $300, you sell for $170. But you're going to get to sell 20,000 units. Now, for a small distributor in a small country that might sell something in the neighborhood of, 1,000 bottles a month, all of a sudden they get this big order from Walmart. And guess what? Walmart doesn't have retail stores in Greece, so you're not worried about your downstream consumers, your downstream retailers getting undercut on prices. So you say, you know what? Okay, and you sell it to Walmart. Now Walmart does what? They take those 20,000 bottles and they bring those 20,000 bottles over to the United States and they sell them at a couple of the Walmart stores. Okay? Now, what's in it for Walmart? Well, Walmart now has something that is $150 to the importer and $300 to the retailer that sells for $600 to the consumer. But they have it in their control for $170 because that's what they paid the Greek importer. They have it for $170 plus whatever their shipping cost was. Now, if they turn around and they say, okay, what we'll do is we'll sell it for $290. What happens? Well, they're selling it for a price below what the retailers in America can buy it for. They can't even put it into their inventory because the importer in the US, if they're doing what their contract says they should, they're buying for $150 and they're selling to their retailers for $300. But Walmart owns that product for $170. If they choose to sell it at $290, they undercut the entire market. And guess what? It's a great margin for Walmart, much higher margin than they're used to working with. But what does it do for Walmart's image? Oh my God, people say, you know, I was in Walmart the other day. I was in Costco the other day. And normally, Chanel perfume costs $600 a bottle, and they were selling it for $290. Wow, they've got great prices. So in somebody's head, they're thinking, wow, Walmart is associated with great prices for me. So it's very good for building the name and the brand and the reputation of Walmart. It creates traffic for Walmart. And the other thing that it does for Walmart is it gives them a good that might not be able to be sold to them, right? I mean, look, Chanel doesn't want their product going through a Tesco shop or a Big C shop or a Walmart. I mean, they want that sold either in their own stores or they want it sold in department stores, right? Fashion stores, areas like that. They don't want it sold in a grocery store someplace. But look, the grocery store needs what? They want products that make them distinct. They want products that add to their image. So this is one of those things where we see things like perfume, clothing. These are the kind of products that are often taken to through gray markets where there's a lot of international distribution diversion. There also, with things like clothing, there tends to be a lot of domestic distribution diversion. You know, look, clothing is a fashion business. Fashion has quick cycles. A lot of times when you can't sell everything that's on your shelves, you dump your inventory. So you dump your inventory to some other retailer so you can get things off of your shelves, but whatever is excess product or excess supply, you dump it into a lower priced channel, right? This is what we call dumping inventory. All right, so sometimes we see this sort of thing. You know, other areas where we've seen it, you know, when technical products like disk drives go on short order supply, some of the major assemblers of computers will over order, and then what they'll do is they'll take the excess order, which is on short supply, and they'll sell it to other assemblers. So they start to act as a retailer position change, okay, taking advantage of these big discounts or lack of product supply. The other thing is things like heavy equipment. Okay, heavy equipment is one of those areas that, you know, the cyclicality of heavy industry or economies, as soon as economies slow down or lighten up, that earth moving equipment, those cranes, they might be $10, $20 million for a crane. Well, you know, when the economy goes down, you may have 3 or 4 years till you sell your next crane or your next piece of earth moving equipment because construction slows down very, very quickly. What will very often happen is firms that have been buying, thinking that the boom was going to continue in their home country, they stop and they start moving the goods to some other place where there's an economic boom taking place. So we see a lot of gray markets happen, and they happen for a lot of different reasons in these different countries. Now, let's look at the gray markets, and let's look at them by the actors, okay? Now, if I just think about gray markets and say, okay, what's the effect for the manufacturer? Is it good or is it bad? I mean, what's the effect for the manufacturer? Well, look, there's some pros and there's some cons. On the pro, if I'm a manufacturer, what do I like about gray markets? I get sales, right? In the short term, I'm making a lot of sales. Those people are effective at moving my product into other markets. Okay, secondly, my product is now available in more locations. Okay, I got other people selling it. I'm not just as dependent on my old traditional channels, right? So it reduces my vulnerability, or it reduces my concentration of buyers. And lastly, okay, is that once those people have that product in their warehouses or on their store shelves, or they have availability of that product, they have to promote it. They have to sell it. So I get a lot more promotional activity. So look, there's some pro benefits for a manufacturer to having your product go into the gray market. People are selling your product. Okay? Secondly, on the other side, we have to look at the cons. So what are the problems? Well, the first one is channel conflict. Okay, as I talked about with the Chanel example, okay, the hypothetical Chanel example, okay, is that, look, if that product is going into the Walmart over in the United States at a discounted price, your legitimate channel, the department stores and the high-end stores that you've been selling your product through for years and years, are going to be upset with you. They're going to be upset with each other. You get a lot of channel conflict, right? So you and your channel will start fighting. Secondly, you see a brand erosion, okay? Look, why do we brand in the first place? Okay, we've talked about this. The reason that you brand in the first place is you want to make sure that you reduce the importance of price in people's decision process, right? We want to reduce the importance of price. So when we start to have different prices in different markets, what do? Well, we're training people to consider price. That's everything against the idea of how we develop a brand. When we're looking to develop a brand, we're looking to get people to think about the features. We're looking to get them to think about how satisfying it is, what differentiates it, what makes it better, what's the value, not what's the price. And once we start talking about price, it erodes the power of that brand. The third thing is we begin to lose control. Okay, look, when you're selling through your own distribution channel, you know your channel. You have relationships with them. You have agreements with them. Okay, on the other hand, when all of a sudden somebody's trading in your product, but you have no relationship, no agreement, okay, who knows what they're going to say? Who knows how they're going to represent your product? What are they going to say about your product? Okay, can they do the after sales servicing? Maybe, maybe not. Okay, now look, if I'm selling something as simple as this bottle of water, okay, I don't need a lot of after sales servicing. But suppose you're selling something like an automobile. Okay, servicing is an awful big part of what makes that automobile good or not good in your mind. Now, I remember I was working with the head of international branding for one of the big auto companies. Now, he was my former student. And he came in and lectured in a class for me while I was teaching in Thailand one time. And he came in the class and I said, tell us a story about gray marketing. And he says, for us, he said, Russia's one of those markets that we didn't want to go into the Russian market. He said, our cars were just not ready for the Russian roads, and we hadn't made the determination to go into the Russian market. But what was happening is there were some Russian entrepreneurs, okay, that would come over to places like Vienna, Austria, or Switzerland, or someplace like this. They would buy a bunch of our Ford automobiles, and then they would take them over to Russia and sell them. Now, is there anything wrong with that at this point? Not really, okay? As long as they're paying the taxes for import duties to the Russian government, okay, there's nothing really wrong with this relationship legally. okay? On the other hand, okay, what did they often do? Well, they took the Ford logo, they would put it up on a sign, and they would call it Sergey's Ford or something like this. Well, if that's the case, okay, now they've kind of broken the trademark law, okay, because they're using somebody else's mark. But they really haven't broken the laws of the Russian government. So it's the sort of thing that the product is gray at this point, okay? So as long as they paid their import duties or taxes or things like this, the product is gray. And as long as they're not stealing the logo of Ford or General Motors or Chrysler or whoever the company is, the product is technically not illegal at that point. Now the problem comes where? Is that, look, somebody comes in and they want to buy your automobile. Okay, so the consumer comes in, they go to buy the automobile, and how does that dealer treat them? Okay, if it's, let's just call it Sergey's Ford, to continue on with the example, and Sergey turns around and charges double the normal price. Now, how does Ford feel about that? Okay, now look, it doesn't affect Ford. They don't make any more money. But what's happening is this new dealer trading in their goods is doing what? He's gouging the marketplace. Okay, he's upsetting the marketplace. So if and when Ford gets ready to go into the Russian market, it may be the case that Ford finds that people don't like them because the brand has been sold at very, very high and very low prices, and they don't trust them, and all kinds of things like this can happen because somebody else is controlling your image and your brand. Usually in your relationship, you have set prices and margin structures and ways of doing business, standard operating procedures. But now you've got cowboys trading in your product that can charge any price they want. But you know, unlike this bottle of water, which doesn't require any servicing. I buy it, I drink it, and I recycle it. Okay, notice how I said recycle. Please do that. Okay, but I buy it and I recycle it. Okay, unlike that, something like an automobile needs what? It needs a lot of servicing. Okay, and to do that servicing, what do you need? Well, I need spare parts, I need trained service technicians, I need authorized dealerships to do that kind of work. So it becomes very difficult for me to do what? To service those automobiles and maintain the quality. So again, by the time Ford actually gets to the market, and maybe people think the product is junk because it's breaking down. Secondly, the customer service and assurances and the way the customer is treated, it might not be there. And then the third thing is your ability to forecast where sales are taking place. Look, the gray market for the manufacturer, once somebody else is trading in your goods, you don't really know where sales are taking place. And if you don't know where sales are taking place, you don't know how many spare parts or how many trained technicians or how many, you just don't know anything about how to support that product out there. So, you know, when I'm looking at the gray market from the eyes or from the view or the vision of the manufacturer, there's some good things. You get a lot of sales, you get a lot of availability, you get a lot of promotional activity behind your products, and you know, you're not as dependent on a few resellers. You've got more people selling your products, so you're not as dependent. It's a bigger numbers situation. On the other hand, longer term, what I would worry about is channel conflict, eroding the prices and seeing brand erosion, a loss of control. Your channel doesn't want to put services in because you know they feel like other people are competing against them on services. Forecasting, having the right number of people out there. There's all kinds of problems to not having or to not having control of your distribution channel. Now look, if I look at this from the unauthorized reseller, now I used the example of Walmart a little bit earlier. Why does Walmart want to trade in Chanel's goods? Okay, well look, there's a lot of margin there, okay? They're used to selling lower end products with just a little bit of margin, but if they can sell these with $120 a bottle, they're gonna sell this stuff all day for $120 a bottle. Okay, secondly, the goods are well known, and that adds to the cachet or the luster or the style of the store. It adds to the image of the store. Okay, as I said, they can sell the product at a very low price and build traffic in their stores. It'll give them demand generation. And that price positioning at a very low price is a way of reinforcing in people's heads that we're a place to come for value, for bargains. Okay? Now look, what's the problem? Okay, well, if you're trading in gray market goods, often you don't have access to the manufacturer. You're not their approved distributor. So for you to be able to service those goods, you may not have the passcodes that are needed to unlock certain softwares. You may not have access to the raw materials or components that you need to refurbish units of something. You don't have the technical training to be able to open up the products and work on the products or services. So it's the sort of thing that servicing becomes very difficult. The other thing is, and this is a very tricky issue, okay? In my own experience, I've noticed that when we start to get into gray markets, we get into what I call unassured sources of supply. Now, what do I mean by an unassured source of supply? Okay, if I go out to that Greek distributor or importer in Greece and say, I want 20,000 bottles. Now look, if that Grecian importer normally sells 1,000 bottles, and now they've got an order for 20,000, what do you think is going to happen back at Chanel? Chanel's going to look and say, what? 21,000 units? You normally sell 1,000 every month, right as rain, but now you're going to sell 20,000? Something's up, and they're going to look at you. Now look, that Grecian importer starts to think to themselves, geez, okay, how many units can I really sell without Chanel becoming aware that I'm cheating on my agreement? Because I don't want to lose my agreement with Chanel. So what do? They say, okay, I'll take 2,000 units that are real and I'll sell those over there to Walmart. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to go to a counterfeiter and get some counterfeit product made. And I'll jam that counterfeit product in with the real product. And nobody's going to know the difference, or nobody's going to be any the wiser. Wow. When this starts to happen, okay, where your unassured source of supply sometimes becomes illegitimate. And this is the way that gray markets often turn into black markets, okay? They didn't intend to go into black market goods, but people know that they're cheating on their agreements. When pressed, what they'll do is they'll begin to counterfeit, okay? They realize that Walmart's not going to be their typical monthly, all the time customer, but they do have this one-shot order, so they don't want to get caught. They don't want to disrupt their normal everyday business. And what they might do is they might turn around and buy goods in the counterfeit market and stock those in. Now, I'm not saying that Walmart does this, and I'm not saying that this happens, but there is the case of a very, 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 very well-known English retailer that was trading in a fashion good. Okay, and what happened was Company X kept calling them up and saying, you don't have a license with us. We don't want to see you selling our product in your store. We're an upmarket good and we don't want to be sold in your grocery store. Yeah. And they kept hanging up the phone. Now what was happening? That British retailer was buying that product, and they were buying that product in the gray market. So one day, the fashion house called the police and said they're selling counterfeit goods with our names on it. And sure enough, they looked into those goods and some of them were counterfeit, and they closed that retailer down. And the next day, front page of the newspaper, a very prominent retailer in England was closed for the day because they were caught selling counterfeit goods. Now think about the brand reputation damage that that retailer might run into for this, okay? So unassured sources of supply can lead you into real big litigation problems, okay? Now look, the last group that we have to consider here in the gray markets is the authorized channel. Now, if I think about the authorized channel, when would I really want to see gray markets? Well, look, if the illegitimate channel or the gray market can't service the products and there's a lot of money in servicing, well, maybe that's good for me. More units in operation leads to more units for me to service, especially if the dealers can't fix them. Like the camera that I'm looking into right now as we record this. If somebody is buying that camera and they don't really have a camera shop, they don't do camera servicing, but they find the cameras are cheaper over in Hong Kong than they are in Des Moines, Iowa, and they've shipped them over to Iowa and they're selling them, chances are they don't want to be in the servicing business. But if I'm the camera company, if I'm Canon or I'm Minolta or somebody like this and I service cameras, well, you know, as a retailer or as a value-added reseller, I might do all that servicing. So having more units sold, I might be able to make more money because of the units in operation. This happens in things like auto businesses. Okay, there's a lot of the money is made where? On servicing. And people buying in one market and then having the car serviced in another market is often a way in which the retailers or the dealers in the auto business make money. The second one might be market awareness. And this is a real stretch, but just the fact that the product is available in more places might make people more aware of your product. That might help retailers to sell the product. That's a bit of a stretch, but let's just say if there is a second pro, that might be it. Now look, the cons are obvious, okay? We get a lot of price pressure, okay? The people who have the gray market goods, they're not going to add to the servicing. They're not going to build the brand, okay? Look, when I take on Canon's camera business or Minolta's camera business, or I take on reselling HP computers, what do? I try to build the brand. I try to build the reputation. I own the brand for the most part in the local marketplace. It's up to me to take care of the customers, to build the assurance behind the name and the reputation. And because why? Because I'm the one who really controls the mark. I'm one of the 4 or 5 resellers that's authorized in the territory to sell it. So I have a tendency to want to build the brand, build the service. And this is why we give people a sole distributorship or an exclusive arrangement, is you want them to do what? To make every dollar possible from the building of that brand. And when I know that I don't face competitors at different prices, I do what? I build the brand because I know I'm going to make the money off of building the brand. But all of a sudden, when I start to have these free riders, people who are coming in that just want to make a profit, but they don't want to do the servicing. They don't want to treat the customer right. They don't want to do take-backs. They don't want to do financing with the customer. They don't want to explain the value of the product. If somebody shows up, buys the product, they're all well and happy, but they don't want to do the hard lifting of running the stores and keeping them up late and educating the marketplace, recognizing that people are going to buy in 2 years or 3 years. Instead, what they do is they come in and they buy product here and they're selling it today, stuff that people just want immediately. And lastly is, look, people get confused, okay? Is it when I see the price at very different prices or when I see the service agreements very differently, okay, what happens? I get confused as a customer. I don't know if this product is legitimate or whether it's counterfeit. I don't know whether it's real, counterfeit, or just gray market. I just don't know. You know, look, if you go into a Costco, Costco sells gray market Rolexes. Now, they say it right there, as they say, this is a Rolex. And let us just say that a Rolex normally sells for $20,000. They'll sell you a Rolex for $9,000. Now, what do you get when you buy a Rolex? Well, normally you get a lifetime service agreement, so they'll always fix your Rolex. Okay? On the other hand, what happens when you buy your Rolex at Costco? They say, we are not an authorized distributor of Rolex. We guarantee that this is an authentic Rolex watch, but if it breaks, we do not service, and it's up to you. There's no service agreement in place. Okay? So this is what we see with gray markets in terms of the impact for the authorized channel. Now look, what are we doing to deal with gray markets? So there's goods and there's bads to the gray market. So let's take a look at how do you get relief. Well, the first thing is what we can do is we can have dealer non-performance clauses. So suppose that Greek importer, we say, hey, if you're caught selling your products on the gray market, selling outside of your territory, we can fine you. We can take back the license. We can release you from our agreement. Those are what we call dealer non-relief clauses. But you know what? There's a lot of country by country differences. Okay, in a place like the United States, you may be able to do that. In a place like Japan, you might be able to do that. On the other hand, if you go down to a place like Brazil, okay, retailers are very, very protected from the international brand companies, and they'll get a lot of what they would call local adaptation of the law. And what will happen is you're not allowed to take your brand back from a reseller of your product as quickly as you might think. So it might be the sort of thing that you say, hey, I caught you selling into the gray market. I caught you breaking our agreement. But the government says you just can't take the brand back. You have to go through all these different steps. Now, one of the most effective ways of stopping gray markets is warranties. Okay, so sell that automobile, but if you bought it in the gray market, all of the warranty doesn't apply. Do you buy an automobile without a warranty? Maybe not. Do you buy a camera without a warranty? Maybe, maybe not. Would you buy a Rolex without a warranty? Right, so one of the things that is often used to slow down the gray market is warranty. The third one is trade laws. Trade laws don't seem to do an awful lot, right? I mean, most countries, you can lobby your government to stop people from bringing in goods through gray markets and what have you. But generally speaking, they haven't been very effective. The IP laws, quite effective, okay? These IP laws are quite effective. Now, sometimes what we see is counterfeiting, okay? And, look, if you're caught selling counterfeit goods, what's the penalty for you, okay? Now, I talked about that retailer and selling fashion goods, okay? We could also look at these companies like eBay or Amazon or people like this that are, selling somebody else's goods that are gray market goods. Do counterfeit goods ever show up there? Yeah, sometimes they do. Right? Jack Ma over there at Alibaba is actually very open about the number of counterfeit goods that are sold on the Alibaba sites. And he's actually tried to go back to the counterfeit producers and ask them to become legitimate and create their own brands. So, look, gray markets are something that, they seem to be here to stay. And these are some of the ways in which we can get relief. Okay? But gray markets are something that in your careers, if you haven't dealt with them yet, chances are you will. Either as a manager of goods and services in a multinational organization or as a consumer shopping in the market. Chances are you're going to experience a gray market. Okay, now look, gray markets are a very, very interesting topic. Gray markets are a topic that, there's a lot of firms that are dealing with them. Is the book out? How do we deal with them? A lot of different ways, and a lot depends on where you are, what country you're in, and what kind of rules and regulations are allowed. Thank you.